when it comes to your personal brand, at the end of the day, because it's personal, right, it has to feel good to you. Like if
Mhm.
you were just to like turn off all the, the noise and put your blinders on for a second, like how
Mhm.
would you want to show up? Like if you didn't
Mhm.
have to worry about money, you didn't have to worry about judgment, if you didn't have to worry about all those things, like how would you really want to show up? And whatever comes to mind when you ask yourself that question, I feel like you really should listen to that because at
Mhm.
your core, that's really what your your being is like asking from you.
Thank you all so much for joining today's conversation. I am really looking forward to this. Micah, thank you so much for being here today with us to talk about this topic. I'm looking forward to this.
Yes, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for us to spend some time together.
Yeah. So, for the audience sake, I know we met at a mentoring event that someone had sponsored. We were both there. And then we got to see each other again at another women's business event. And,
Mhm.
I've just, from that event and then forward, I just have kind of been fangirling from afar. So I loved your business capability statement when you sent me, we were like emailing about it. And I saw your business capability statement and I was like, wow, like that is a great way of talking about your business and laying it out. So I was like, I'm gonna try to do something like that. It's not quite yours, but it's directionally correct. So I use that as an example. I love
Love
your
it. I love
LinkedIn
it.
post. Yeah, I love your LinkedIn posts. They're always so interesting.
Thank you.
And you just have such good personal style. So I just was really looking forward to this conversation. I thought you were the
Thank
perfect person for this.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I receive all of this.
Yeah.
We just try to do our best. So I love
Absolutely. And one of the reasons I really wanted to have this conversation is that many senior leaders, many of our clients are now thinking about their personal brand in ways that I don't think they did before, and even
yeah.
ways I don't think I did before either. In the last 5 years, maybe 5 to 7 years, it feels like having a LinkedIn profile, engaging on social media, publishing content, or engaging with someone else's content, all of that has become almost an expectation for some senior leaders, definitely
Yeah.
CEOs, people in senior levels of the company, but even for all of us, it's like a
Yeah.
way to kind of seek out career opportunities, attract the right career opportunities, seek
Mhm.
out business for ourselves, seek out business for the places we're working for. It's just become a bigger, I think, focus than I remember in years past. I don't know. Are you seeing that or what do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. I think, honestly, I think what it is, I think there's been this really cool shift to where the platforms are allowing people or empowering people more to show up
Mhm.
fully.
Hmm.
You mentioned LinkedIn, right? Like a few years ago, LinkedIn truly was for you to like just get a job or
Yes.
like just, expand your network so that you had a Rolodex to get a job. It's very
Hmm.
much like career oriented only and job oriented only.
Yeah.
But I know a woman who I actually fangirl over, and she's a B2B content creator, and she does incredible brand partnerships on LinkedIn. Shout out
Yeah.
Kate iPowell. She is like killing the game in terms of social media strategy, bringing her personality. She's unapologetically herself. She kind of treats LinkedIn like Twitter in a way. Um,
Mm.
but the platform rewards her for it. And so I think just more and more, we're creating more space for people to show up more fully. And
Yeah.
I think, we choose who we work with. We want to work with people that we like and that we connect with,
Yeah.
and their energy matches ours. And I think being able to show that helps you, find your people.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. The positive side of that, because I thought about I had a friend of mine call me a few weeks ago and she hadn't been on LinkedIn in a long time and she had just gotten on and she was, reading through the feed and other things. She was like, I thought LinkedIn was business. That's what she exactly said, because I think she picked up on she
Yeah.
hadn't been on in years, like how much it's changed to your
Yeah.
point, it's more about who you are, which can include
Yes.
business, but it's not exclusively business. It's a lot
True.
more personal than it used to be.
Yeah.
But she
That's
actually
true.
noted that and was like
She's like, what's
mortified.
going on here? Yeah.
Exactly.
But
She was
the truth is, as you get, like you deal with more and more senior leaders or you interact with other C-suite executives, you realize that that really is kind of how they conduct business. It's
hmm
like, oh yeah, this is my buddy, so and so and so, and like we went to college together, or we did whatever, but they have
hmm
these affiliations and these commonalities. that really have nothing to do with like the
Yeah.
actual product or service, but has everything to do with like the character and the personality of the person. And so I think that's opening itself up more to people to really see how they can leverage it, not just being a CEO, but just in your, in your day to day.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this, just your background. You've had a background in a lot of different areas, journalism, art, you certainly do marketing and branding. You have your own business, so I know you have background strategy. Like what spurred your interest in these different areas and how have they kind of come together for you?
So I hopefully I can try to give this answer in a nutshell, but it really has been like a very non-linear path for me. But I will always say that I have been a storyteller no matter what.
Mm,
Like for as long as I could remember, like even growing up, I used to want to be like a fashion magazine editor. So I would take like
mm.
clothing catalogs and like paper like sketch pads and like cut out clothes and I would put together my outfits for school and I won best dressed my senior year in high school. Okay, that's my one
Come
claim
on
to
now.
fame. But I was obsessed with fashion. I wanted to be a stylist. I wanted to work for the
Mm,
fashion magazines. I was kind of born in the wrong era to do that. By the time I graduated college, that was just not, it was just not a bustling industry to really pursue. And so I've always been interested in like telling creative stories. So right out of undergrad, I started a magazine here in Dallas and did 3 print issues of that. And that really just took like some really serious issues and like juxtaposed them with
mm,
editorial photo shoots. So you got the visual that was enticing, but it was deeper storytelling. And so I did that for like 3 years, and it was not profitable at all.
mm.
But it was really fun. It was a beautiful experience. We still get people that talk about the magazine or ask us when we're going to do another one all the time.
Yeah.
But that is what led me to going back to school and getting my MBA because I was like, what? I worked with a lot of creatives and I was like, we just don't understand like the business acumen. And I really want to
Mm,
see us win. Like, I don't want us to all be like starving artists, And
yeah.
it was like,
Yeah.
I want to be able to bridge the gap. Like I want to know how I can monetize like my creativity and speak the language of, the business folks and help them also understand the power of creativity. And so that brought me back to my MBA. And then fast forward, I graduated during COVID, um,
Mm,
and accepted a position at a startup that was absolutely horrible.
mm.
So that really just led me to like tapping into like what is it that you're good at, Myca? And so in the beginning, I was doing everything like press releases, writing website copy, social media, like whatever anybody needed. I was like, I'm your girl.
Yeah.
Whoever has a budget, I can do.
Exactly. I could do that. I can do
Yes,
that.
yes. And
Yes.
so that was my early days. And so now, going into my 5th year or almost finishing out my 5th year of business, I will say that I really have niched down more into the strategy piece and I focus more on like target audience work, brand positioning, messaging, really the essence of the story, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I do. That's my bread and butter. But I'm also, because I'm able to finance my life and,
Yeah.
make money doing what I do, I also am able to do creative projects on the side and still kind of, flex that creative muscle, outside of the work that I'm doing day to day. So that's kind of how I'm able to bring it all together. But the storytelling has always been a part of my journey.
I can see that across the disciplines, whether you look at,
Hmm.
art, branding, journalism, strategy, there's definitely a storytelling component in all those areas. So I could
Yes.
absolutely see that.
Hmm.
And congratulations on 5 years. That's
Thank
fantastic.
you. Thank you.
Yes, that's
Thank
a
you
big
so much.
milestone. Yeah.
Yes. It's crazy. Sometimes you look back and you're like, how did we get here? We got here.
But
So
you did.
yes,
Exactly. But
yes,
you did.
exactly. Yes.
Okay, so how do you, when you think of personal brand and someone establishing their personal brand, like how would you define a personal brand? What do you think of?
So I guess a personal brand is really how you want to show up online, or even offline, like how you want to show up in the world and what you want people to feel or do when they
Mm,
interact with you. I think is like the simplest way to put it. And then, of course, that looks differently for all of us. But yeah, I think it's being able to show up, as yourself and share the things that you care about and being able to connect with people that care about those things too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you see that like the feeling? Um, yeah, I can kind of think through that. Like, what's the feeling you want people to have when they interact with you?
Mhm.
Do you think of that as the same as a business brand, or do you think of them differently?
Yes and no. I would say yes, is because the foundation, I feel like, of all brands should be humanity. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're a logo, but at the end of the day, that logo represents your employees, represents your leadership, represents the customers and the community that you serve.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I love that's happening more and more in like today's world of branding is that they associate a face or a personality or a character or a set of core values with the brand. Um, I think when you try to separate that, right, you lose the humanity of, who you
Yeah.
are and who you serve.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, a business brand, the function of a business brand, I think is different, right? You do have certain responsibilities and obligations that you might not necessarily have to conform to,
Mm-hmm.
in your personal brand because you,
Mm-hmm.
you own it and it's whatever you want it to be. But for business purposes, right? And like you might be I don't know, you might have just thinking like demographically or like culturally, like you might be in Dallas and you might I don't know, be a vegan or whatever. But if you have stake in a company that is, it serves a community or a population that's different and maybe in a different place or maybe has a different diet or, just things like that, you do have to be mindful of those things to
Mm-hmm.
make strategic decisions about how your brand shows up the more and more you learn about your audience.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the greatest example. I could have come with a better example, but just you have to try to find alignment with who it is that is your buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that doesn't mean you take the humanity out of it, but it does mean that you have to be a little bit more strategic. And like I said, you do have some other things that you have to be more mindful of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I could see that. Yeah, there's some elements that probably align,
Yes,
and some that probably don't, and you're gonna kind of
yes,
lean in on or focus on the elements that do align as opposed to those things that could be
exactly,
detractors or
exactly.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
um what do you, I just learned this recently, which is
Mm-hmm.
wild to me that I never thought about it before, but in the recent years I've really started to look at branding and marketing differently. I
Yes,
think before I thought, it's kind of two words for the same thing, is what I think I thought. Yeah,
yes,
I've learned
yeah.
recently, no, that's not actually true. So can you
Uh-huh.
explain how you see the difference between branding and marketing?
Yes, yes. So when you talk about brand,
Hmm.
brand is like who you are. Like what's your mission, what's your vision, what are your core values? Why did you start the business? Who do you serve? Like that is like it's like the ethos of who you
Okay.
are.
Hmm.
Marketing is how you communicate your brand, right? And so marketing looks different for different brands depending on who you serve and, a list of other factors. So what I have found is that a lot of people skip to doing marketing and they don't know what their
Mm,
brand is. And so that's kind of where the confusion and, lack of ROI and misalignment and all these things happen because there hasn't been like true core foundational work done on who you actually are. And I think that
mhm.
applies in like life, right? Like if you don't know who
Yeah.
you are, you can't like show up in the world and expect people to find alignment with you because you're not aligned with yourself. And so I think, yeah, the brand has to be established first, and then you decide how you're going to talk about it through your marketing channels.
Okay. Yes. So it starts with, okay, that makes sense. Starts with the brand, then you figure out how you're going to share it through your marketing. And
Hmm.
it's kind of interesting, even the statement you made earlier around the personal brand and its alignment with the business. Because I've been having those conversations with the person who does some of our website type things around like for when I started the business, I think I tried to just lead with the business and like
Yes.
myself was separate because it
Yeah.
just felt so uncomfortable. The idea
Mm-hmm.
of leading with yourself, it just was like very
Yes.
uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, several people have told me you can't really do that, especially as a small business. Like you
Yes.
are the face of the business, so you
At
can't
that stage.
you
Mm-hmm.
can't hide all the time. Like
Right.
you have to be willing to put yourself out there as a face of the business
Yeah.
occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm just wondering for people who may be where I was partially am, but just feel overwhelmed with this idea of like branding yourself or maybe
Yes.
even uncomfortable with the idea. Like, where do you think they should start?
So, my suggestion is always just to kind of start by listening to others or like getting inspired by others. So, don't feel like right away you just have to start creating things and just throwing yourself out there. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe just spend some time on platforms like connecting with other people that find, core or like alignment with in terms of things that you guys care about. Or maybe start commenting on different content and sharing your thoughts and your opinions, your expertise, or resharing some things, right? So just very low hanging fruit.
Mm,
You don't have to
yes.
do anything original, but just get comfortable like being on there, connecting with other people who
Hmm.
love what you love, care about what you care about, and
Hmm.
then you can kind of observe like what do you enjoy consuming, what kind of like turns you off? What is
Hmm.
something that you think you would enjoy creating? Like, oh man, I really love how, she edited this video, or I love how
Yeah.
she, shared this graphic or this infographic, whatever it might be. And so just kind of find that inspiration first,
Hmm.
would be like my first recommendation. And then I always tell people like, don't do things you don't want to do. Like don't do things if you hate being on video,
Yeah.
don't force yourself to do video because you're not going to stick to it. Like,
Yeah.
unless your industry or your customer is like demanding, like, we want more DIY videos or we want to see more tutorials, like,
Yeah.
whatever. Okay, sometimes you got to listen to that. But for the most part, like, if you don't like doing it, don't do it. Like,
Hmm.
video is everywhere. And I'm not a video girly. I'm a writer. I'm a
Hmm.
storyteller. I'm a writer. And that's my thing. And so that's what I have leaned into. That's what people can expect from me when they look at my content on LinkedIn. I mean, every
Hmm.
now and then there'll be a video, like every several months, and it's probably a video from somebody else that they gave it to me where I was talking, but I'm
Yeah.
not um I'm not a fan of like forcing people to do things that,
Mm-hmm.
are really not a core part of who they are. Now, if you want to, I am a fan of like making myself uncomfortable, right? Trying new things.
Hmm.
But if you try it and it just doesn't feel like you,
Hmm.
people feel that when they consume the
Yeah.
content, and I see it all the time. And I'm like, I see what you're trying to do, but this does not feel,
Right.
authentic
Yeah.
to you.
Uh-huh.
Heard somebody say that you need to write 5 LinkedIn articles a week. And so now you're
Mm.
writing 5 LinkedIn articles a week, and it just feels so abrupt and out of, their norm. So yeah, so that's what I would say is like find your inspiration, but then also find like what works for you, because what works for you is
Hmm.
what will be sustainable. Because
Yeah.
if you don't have sustainability, you don't have consistency, and consistency is what creates brand recognition and brand loyalty and all those things that we want. And so don't commit to something that is just it's not yours.
Oh, that's good. That's so good. You're right, because the consistency part, and you're right, you just kind of can feel when it's not when you're uncomfortable, doing
Yes.
something, it absolutely shows up.
Yes.
Um, so I could really see that. And I like those are doable. Like getting
Yes.
inspired is very doable.
Yes.
Commenting on someone else, like doing what feels good to you right now is also very doable. It's like an easy way in.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's just low hanging fruit to kind of warm you up, and then
Yes.
then you can kind of take that. I have a mentor who he does like LinkedIn trainings, and he has like this framework that he calls like crawl, walk, run. And like, the
Mm.
crawl stage is literally just like get on the platform, and
Right. Yes.
start, optimizing your profile. Like that's literally just step one.
Yeah.
Think about all the other things because then you quit before you even start.
Right. You're overwhelmed. And you're like, forget it. I knew I
Exactly.
didn't want to do this in the first place.
Exactly.
Okay, so you kind of went there a little bit with maybe sometimes we do the marketing for the branding or just what do you think are mistakes people make when they build their brand online? Like what are some things we should not do or avoid doing, would you recommend?
Yeah, so I'm a little biased because I'm a strategist, but I think the biggest piece that people miss most times is strategy. I'm saying this, like I said, I have a little bit of bias, but also I know this through like other agency partners that I've worked with. So like a lot of times when we first start the business, we're like, okay, I need a website, I need a logo, I need to do a brand photo shoot, I need to set up all my social media channels. And you kind of have this checklist of all the things that you do. And so
Mm-hmm.
then you go to like a graphic designer or a photographer, you go to somebody and you kind of tell them, I have
Yeah.
this business, I want to do all these things. And a lot of times, they'll create something good, but it not might not be aligned with like what you really needed to have done. And so
Mm-hmm.
the biggest mistake that I see people make is like not taking time to understand their competitors, to not
Mm-hmm.
understand what's happening in their industry, not understanding who their audience is. Like, I'll give you an example. I worked with a client a few years ago. She had kind of like a luxury women's clothing brand. And we started our engagement doing like I did an audit of her channels. And so she's based here in Dallas. But through an audit, like we discovered that a large part of her website traffic and social media traffic was coming from the East Coast and coming from Europe.
Mm.
And it's
Wow.
like the way that you market to each of those audiences is like completely different than the way you would talk to a woman here in Dallas shopping the brand. And
Mm.
so just that small insight would inform the colors you choose, the language
Yeah.
you choose, the brand photography that you choose, right? You don't want to like a summer Texas shoot doesn't make sense for people in the East
Yeah.
Coast or with like people overseas,
Yes.
like that is not so there's so much groundwork that should be done before making those creative decisions. It's just that part is not always fun, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's the research and information heavy,
Yeah.
data heavy, but the colors is really fun and like building the website, all that's so fun. But so many people end up wasting their money and then they're like, hey, we need to do a rebrand because
Mm-hmm.
XYZ, we learned this through, kind of trial and error, blah, blah, blah. But it's like a lot of times you can reveal that information can be revealed to you before you even start creating those things. So I think that's the biggest mistake that I see people make is just not doing the strategy work before going into creating things.
That is it's like you were in my day today. We were talking about how we both got a lot of things done today. Well, one of the things I have to share this because it's just so relevant. One of the things I was doing today was I was submitting content for an interview article and they asked for photos. I
Mm-hmm.
asked for a lot of them, like more than I normally, like more that it was in my kind of more recent photos. So I was going back to
Right.
some older ones to pull a photo.
Uh-huh.
And a friend of mine who was so sweet, when I published my book years ago, she said, "Let me do a branding photo shoot for you, totally free." She was like, "Let me
Uh-huh.
just do it."
Yes.
I was like, "Oh my God," I had no idea what it was. I was like, "That sounds awesome." She was like what colors? I was like, I don't like, I mean, I just pulled my favorite shirt. It was totally like clashing with the color of the book and everything, but I didn't think about it. And she was like, she was telling, bring your props, bring your like, and I just,
Mm-hmm.
and so I did it and I was able to use those photos at that point. But it's funny when
Yes.
I look back at them today to pull it, I was like, I can't send that. It's just so
Does it
off
go? Yeah.
from like, you know what I mean? It's so off from like the brand that I would say I have now and even the alignment to the business I have now that
Yes.
I was shocked. I was like, wow, I cannot use any of these. Like they just
Right. You've
because
come
I
a long
didn't know
way.
who I was. Yeah, exactly. I was like,
Yes.
I didn't know who I wanted to show up as, so I just
Yes.
showed up.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
so it really limits I guess, the life cycle of that kind of stuff because
Yes.
it just doesn't align anymore.
That's
So,
so true. I love that you said that because I was just talking with the photographer that I work with for my brand photos, and I told him, I said, I'm still using those photos now. I was like, my haircut's not even the same. I was like, but they're still so relevant to my brand and they're so timely. He's also just a great photographer. But I was like, that is like when you have that level of alignment, a lot of your
mhm.
content can be repurposed for like over a year, like, and it
On. Yes.
still be relevant. So yes, I love that you mentioned
Mhm.
that. Like, it's definitely expands the life cycle of your content.
Yes. Okay, so let me ask you this. I know a lot of people are building their personal brand, but working for an organization or a
Yeah.
company. Like, how do you think about the alignment of that two, those two
Mm.
things? Like, how do you align maybe your personal brand with the organization you're working for? Should you, like, how do you think about those two things? Because sometimes I've noticed sometimes when people are posting, sometimes it's for external, but also it kind of builds your internal credibility as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, like if you're inside an organization. So I'm just curious on how do you think about how people align or don't align, especially in light of the authenticity part that you mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I've seen it done both ways.
Mm.
Like I've worked with clients where we have like activated their employee voices
Mm.
because it was an opportunity, like maybe they had trade shows coming up or things like that. And so we would kind of set up what we call employee advocacy programs. And
Hmm.
so especially like there are especially people in like senior leadership, right? They typically have a lot of expertise and things that they can share. And so, I've dealt with it from that side. But I've also had people that come to me that are like, okay, I'm starting my own brand, but I still have my full-time job. And
Yeah.
so but I don't want them to like there could potentially be a conflict of interest, or I don't
Hmm.
want other people to know like what I'm doing. So I don't want to be on LinkedIn or,
Hmm.
whatever. So I think it depends on the situation. I actually there's a woman on LinkedIn that I follow. Her name is Jelani Weaver. I don't know if you've ever seen her before, but
Mm-mm.
she works for Geico, but she is a recruiter. And
Mm.
she is one of the top LinkedIn voices. And recently she just posted that Geico like made her the voice of like employee recruiting on LinkedIn. And
Wow.
so they are like supporting her. She's always very vocal about recruiting tips, interview tips, and things like that. And she mentioned that she had had jobs in the past where they didn't like that she was bringing that extra attention, and
Mm.
that fell out of alignment with her. And so she was happy that she had an employer that
Mm.
empowered her to share that content. So I think
Yeah.
again, it kind of goes back to like what you want. If you love your job and they align with your values and you want to, be an advocate for what it is that they do, then that works too. But some people want to be separate from that because long term, that's not their plan is to
Mm.
stay there and grow with that company. And so, in those situations, I'm like, all right, well, let's get you on Instagram or TikTok, or email marketing, whatever outside
Mm.
of that, platform, at least for now, while you're trying to
Mhm.
like maintain that separation. So yeah, I think it just, it depends on where you are and what your desires are. And if you find alignment with that particular role in your career and see it being a part of your long-term, you know,
Mhm. Yeah. Uh-huh. That makes sense. Yeah. And there are other platforms um and I think it's great when you can pull them together. Like the idea that her organization is supportive of that and
hmm
even bolstering that, encouraging that, I think
Yeah,
that's amazing. And at the same time will make her desired by other organizations too, because
exactly.
not that she will, but if she were to
Yeah.
move, she's going to pull a lot of capital
Yes, she's got
visibility,
leverage.
yeah, to
Yes.
whatever wherever she goes. So it's kind of
Yeah.
that's definitely a win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I mean, she's
Mhm.
got her own newsletter now and different companies sponsor her newsletter. So I think it can be done really well, especially if you really love, the job or the company that you work for.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this. What if you're trying to refresh your brand? And when I think of refresh brand, I think of partly brand the way you described it as like who
Mm,
you are, but it also could be, I think sometimes when people say refresh brand, they mean their outward. You know what I mean? It's like I need a refresh of
yeah.
how I'm showing up. I don't know. As you think
Mhm.
of either one of those, what are your thoughts on that? On kind of refreshing your brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think like anything in life, right? You got to check in, and just kind of make sure that things really do still things are really where you want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just a fan of doing like at the end of the year, we always do like a full kind of analysis of all the different areas of the business, finance,
Mm-hmm.
operations, sales, and marketing, I think are the areas that we look at. And so you just kind of have to benchmark yourself and see like what's working, what's not working. A lot of times like that's one of the kind of inflection points when clients come to me is like, well, we've been doing the same thing for like a year and a half and it's just plateaued, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes that means that you need a different approach to your marketing, but sometimes it does mean that you need to refresh your brand because
Mm-hmm.
maybe your audience desires have shifted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or there's a generational shift that's taking place and you can't use the same language that you used
Mm.
before. And so yeah, you sometimes those shifts are just blaring, because
Mm-hmm.
just the times have changed, your audience wants something different, the industry has changed, or maybe you notice something that your competitors are doing that's, working really well, and maybe they're stealing market share. Like sometimes it really is a business decision because,
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing isn't working anymore. But you
Mm-hmm.
don't know that if you're not measuring it or checking in, right? So it's always, you have to look at your analytics. You have to listen to your customers and your audience to gain those insights. Because if you don't, that's kind of how you get kind of stuck in what I always say, like, what is it, like marketing purgatory? You're just like, you're
Doing
not
the
going
same
up, you're not going
things.
down, you're just, and so yeah, that's what I would say.
That's interesting. Yeah, and even the idea about once a year or so. Yeah, I think I in my mind I probably would have put a longer timeline on it, but I guess things are changing so quickly. You probably at least need to consider it. Not saying you have to change, but
Yeah.
you need to check in and see if your branding is working at least probably once a year.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just adding small enhancements, like maybe more
Mm-hmm.
brand symbols or different brand language, or maybe add an accent
Yeah.
color. Or like it doesn't always have to be super drastic and abrupt. It could just be
Yeah.
a reaction to a simple, insight or learning from your audience or your industry.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then, okay, let me ask this. That's kind of the business side. You'd mentioned your kind of love of fashion and foray into that, even your accolade, best dressed
Yeah.
in high school, which I
My
love.
one claim to fame.
Your claim to fame, even that, like, as you think about fashion as a tool for branding or, whether it's personal or business, like, how do you think about that? I'm even curious on how did you come up with your own personal style?
Yeah. So I get really intellectual about these things. This is my kind of conversation.
Mhm.
I love fashion, but not from like your typical perspective, right? I love that fashion it is so much more than clothes. There's what's that scene in like Devil Wears Prada? And she's like, "You think that you're just wearing blue." And it's like, "No, you're not." Like
Yes.
what you wear really does show what you care about, what you don't care about. Sometimes it's a political statement. Sometimes it's a cultural statement. Like there was a time we couldn't show our shoulders. There was a time we couldn't show our ankles.
Yeah.
There's just so much that your fashion allows you to express. It's an economic,
Mhm.
symbol. It's just there's so many layers to it.
Hmm.
And so that one thing that I've just loved about fashion is it drives larger conversations outside of the clothes or the accessories or whatever
Hmm.
themselves. And so that's one thing that I had always also loved about like high fashion and like haute couture and things because,
Hmm.
these people were like all about the spectacle and the story. A lot of times it's things you can't
Yeah.
even wear, but it's like
Yeah.
a message that I'm trying to share through what I've created. And so, I know the fashion
Hmm.
industry does get a lot of, heat as they should, but they're making some strides. But I do see fashion designers and creators and things very similar to the way I see like painters and designers and other creatives in that they kind of tell the story of the time,
Hmm.
through their different creations. And so but in terms of like my personal style and things like that, I grew up obsessed, like with reading all the different like fashion catalogs and magazines and watching America's Next Top Model and
Yeah.
all the things. And I was also a fashion media major in undergrad.
Hmm.
In addition to journalism. And so I took a lot of like fashion theory classes. So learning about color and culture and all of these things
Hmm.
like influence how we buy and how we see clothes. And so I love that fashion is just more than what meets the eye. And I
Hmm.
think so much of that I do bring into the work that I'm doing with clients, whether it's like setting up a photo shoot or styling a photo shoot or mood boarding for a photo shoot or creating a brand, thinking about color theory and how,
Hmm.
people are going to associate or what people are going to associate the brand with.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of I feel like that world that kind of infiltrates what I do that um I think kind of brings a competitive edge because I'm not always looking
Yeah.
at things through like the traditional business lens. And so some people appreciate it, some people don't. But I think I think it's one thing that I love to use in my toolkit, to kind of help
Hmm.
solve problems and look at things differently.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a standout factor. Like that was one of the things I was like, oh wow, I really like her style. Like it brings in a really good way. Like, I think then when you interact with someone, you also has to be like, oh, and I was like, oh, she's really friendly and but I think it can bring attention in a good way. It's just as,
Yeah.
to who you are and kind of what you value. And I
Yes.
hadn't thought about all the different layers of what fashion can mean,
Hmm.
or the messages it can send. That's really
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah, and, like, you think about, like, the Black Panthers or someone wearing a hijab,
Yeah.
or just all of these different things,
Hmm.
communicate so many things
Yeah.
without saying anything.
Without saying anything. Oh,
Mhm.
that's really interesting. Okay, so let me ask you this. If someone was interested in working with you or your business from a marketing or branding standpoint, how can they partner with you? How can they work with you?
Yes. So a couple of different ways. I have like strategy calls. So some people just are like, I want to pick your brain, Micah. And,
Yeah.
or I have this one, just marketing question that I can't get answered. So that's kind of like low hanging fruit.
Hmm.
But then we also do like brand audits. So that's kind of
Hmm.
like my intro, kind of, I would say probably my most popular way that people start working with me
Hmm.
is we do like a 360 brand audit. So looking at all of your different marketing channels, not just from the quantitative side, but from the qualitative side. So looking at your
Hmm.
visual aesthetics, but then also looking at your analytics and telling the story from that way. And so we, build out a complete report, recommendations. And so that's a lot of times how people start working with me is I do the audit and they're like, oh, I got all these things that I need to
Yeah.
do. Can you fix them? And so, but then I do like full-fledged, strategy engagements. And so those are usually customized just based on the client's needs. So, it could be like email marketing, social media
Mhm.
marketing, could be a holistic marketing strategy. And so yeah, but the best way I would say is we typically just book a quick discovery call and I kind of give you a few options for how we can work together. I also have like a quiz that I really encourage people to take. It's like, do you really need a marketing strategist? Because
Okay.
one of the things I'm like, I try not to, I think one of the most core pieces of a business before you get to marketing is like true sales and operations strategy for the business.
Hmm.
Because you can't do anything without processes or cash. And so
Hmm.
my recommendation is always like, I would love for you to work with me. But,
Yeah.
if those things in the business you don't feel very confident about like your sales or your processes,
Hmm.
invest in that first before
Hmm.
you come to me because I'm going to start asking you to do a lot of things or potentially investing in a lot of things. And if those things aren't in place, it's going to be hard for you to see the value of the investment because
Hmm.
that's my little caveat there.
Well, yeah, that's good business wisdom. That's
Yes,
good business
I try to
wisdom.
pass it along when I can.
That's good wisdom. And also it seems like you're offering some things for small businesses too, as well, that may be like more training or kind of
Yes.
informational type things.
Yes, yes. So I have also done like workshops and
Mm-hmm.
trainings for like nonprofits who support entrepreneurs. But I've also been working with marketing agencies, so who have marketing teams who need professional development.
Yeah.
I've had some real success around topics like sales psychology, buyer behavior, behavioral science, things like that, and how to
Ooh.
use that for like social and in your marketing. And so I've gotten some really good feedback on those programs lately. So yeah, I also get to put on my former educator hat a little bit
Yeah.
and facilitate those. So that's been really rewarding too.
Oh, that's awesome. Welcome to Enelra. Have you ever thought about unlocking the full potential of yourself or the leaders in your organization? Imagine the impact of executive coaching. Ready to transform your leadership impact? Visit us at www.enelratalent.com. Enelra, coaching solutions that work. So let me ask you this. Last two questions. The first one just is what if someone's thinking about personal branding, the things we talked about today, what would you most want them to walk away with from this conversation? Like what do you want them to walk away the most?
Yes, that's a great question. I guess I would say when it comes to your personal brand, at the end of the day, because it's personal, right? It has to feel good to you. Like if
Mhm.
you were just to like turn off all the, the noise and put your blinders on for a second, like how
Mhm.
would you want to show up? Like if you didn't
Mhm.
have to worry about money, you didn't have to worry about judgment, if you didn't have to worry about all those things, like how would you really want to show up? And whatever comes to mind when you ask yourself that question, I feel like you really should listen to that because at
Mhm.
your core, that's really what your your being is like asking from you. And so you might not be able to just kind of take it and run with it, but I say listen to it and see how you can lean into that in just a small way.
Mhm.
Whether that's just through again through like the language that you're using when you're interacting with other people, all the way to, if it is something you want to really talk about or start producing content around. Um but yeah, I would just say like be really honest about how it is you really want to show up because again, it's your personal brand. It's like
Mhm.
it's not tied to, anyone else. It's really how you want to be seen and show up. So I would say to really start there, have those really honest conversations. I
Mhm.
think that will reveal some pretty useful insights.
Okay. And then last question, how do you work well, live well? Just meaning, what's one, two of your best tips for creating a meaningful life? Like, what is it you do to just live well, do you think?
Yes, I mean, I keep my tribe, of like kind of my wellness people, accountability people.
Mhm.
So I have like an executive coach, I
Mhm.
have my therapist, I
Mhm.
have, different processes in place that help me set boundaries, I have my team, so I think it's more a lot of it really for me has been people
Mhm.
that just kind of help like remind me like, hey Mikey, you really are doing your best, or hey, that was some really great work, or hey, I noticed you're tired, I think you need to pull back a little bit, or I noticed the last time we had this conversation you said X. Having that um tribe that can be a mirror for you, I think
Mhm.
is what has really helped me. And then just from like the physical standpoint, I'm a big yogi. This is more of like a
Mhm.
recent thing in like the last 6 months or so. I was like a big gym goer, but I was like,
Mhm.
I would go to yoga like once a week, but I was like, I really want to focus on like mobility and grounding,
Mhm.
centering myself because entrepreneurship is chaos. And
Yes.
so that has been a major practice that is just been a game changer for me in just terms of like building strength and breathing through the hard things. So I would say those are two big things for me.
Those are both amazing. And yeah, the people around you, that's definitely one of mine too. Like that, they really can
Yes.
help you stay grounded and live a
Yes.
meaningful and just better,
Fuel you.
yeah,
Yes.
a full
Mm-hmm.
life. So I love
Yes.
that. So,
Yes.
Micah, thank you so much for joining. I so appreciate your time and your
Yes.
contributions and your ideas. It definitely has me thinking differently about a couple areas. So I'll probably be reaching
Great.
out at some point. I'm like, yes, I need that audit. Yes, I need
Yes.
this. So it's been
Yes.
so helpful. And thank you so much for joining.
Yes. No, thank you so much for this conversation. This was absolutely wonderful. Let's do it
Let's do
again.
it. Thanks for listening to the Work Well, Live Well podcast. If you're ready to grow as a leader or as an organization, head to enelratalent.com. That's ENELRA talent.com to learn how we can support you. Like what you heard? Follow or review the show so you don't miss what's next.